bring to order this meeting of the regular council meeting held here on August 28th at 6 p.m. Just a little bit short of 6 p.m. here this day in Weyburn City Council chambers. First order of business is approval of the minutes. The regular council meeting held August 14th. Do we have approval?
Your Worship, I'll make that motion.
Seconder?
Second it, Your Worship.
Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Additions to the agenda?
Your Worship, I just wanted to identify that under new business, there's item D and E, which are item D, which is reports coming out of the admin committee meeting.
Under item, which one? New business? Okay.
New business.
Okay.
Under new business, that's correct. D, report coming out of the admin committee.
Any other additions?
I'll move those additions, Your Worship.
I'll second those, Your Worship.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. If you could just scroll down just one touch there, just to get my... There are no public hearings and notices. There's no original communications, delegations, or petitions at this time on this meeting. With that being said, we're going to move to Part 5, Reports to Council. The first one are our Public Reports, Public Works and Parks Report for July and August by Councillor Mickle. Go ahead, Mr. Mickle.
Thank you, Worship. This is Public Works and Parks for July and August of 2017. Under sewer and water, during that period, there were 18, I called them digs. In those 2 months, 18 of them, in fact. 5 of them, over half of them were 4 water sewer connections and 5 hydro excavation curb box repairs, so our guys were kept very busy. We're fortunate, Your Worship, to have a capable staff to do that, and we thank them for the work that they do for the city of Weyburn. Repairs were also made to our Star main culvert on Sims Avenue, and citywide meter reading was completed during that period. And a house-by-house inspection of identified lead lines was determined, and of that 220, I have good news, Your Worship. I believe 48 were found, and that is good news because, as you know, and Council knows, we have a timeline for that grant money, which is March 31st, and I'm sure we can come in within those lines to get that project done. And that's part of the Clean Water Wastewater Funding Project. Routine inspection and maintenance has continued at the lagoon or lift stations. Regular flushing of water mains were conducted on an ongoing basis, and hydrant repair and maintenance was conducted at certain locations. Under street and roads, regular grading and maintenance to gravel streets, and that's back lanes included. Asphalt repairs, you drive our city of Weyburn, our crews, again, of patching have done a tremendous job starting early in May and finalizing it now. And they didn't have much off time because it hasn't rained, so they had a lot of good working days to do that. And again, we are fortunate to have capable people in our system to do that kind of work, and we thank you for that. Street sweeping along primary and secondary collector routes is ongoing. Refuse collection and landfill operations continued throughout this period. With the rollout of the recycling earlier in July, Public Works thought there may be concerns, but you know what? We have good news. Things do work out. And in Your Worship, I just want to share this with the general public and council. In my walks in the morning early, I'm actually peeking inside some of those bins, and the recycling bins, Your Worship, are full, and the garbage bins that I have seen are half empty to less than that. So that tells me that it's working, and within a few years from now, or maybe less than that, maybe we can only do 2 garbage pickups a month. So I thank you people for being patient with us. It took us almost 16 years to get the recycling. We're moving forward. It's the blue box, remember that. It's very good. The former parking meters, which I believe your worship has his finger on this, have been removed, your worship, and it looks good. And I walked there the other day, and I didn't trip over any, so they did a good job. A large-scale cleanup was conducted on the city farms, city property, following the departure of Health International, and this is ongoing, and most of it will be completed. Repair and replacement of street and traffic signs were conducted. A large overhead pedestrian crossing sign at 2nd Street, 1st Avenue Northeast was replaced. Now we're going to parks, and our people, again, a tremendous job with the parks. Not much rain over there in Jubilee Park, the gem of the city, by the way, but our crews do a good job all around the city, and I thank them for that. Irrigation repair and maintenance, regular scheduled operations continue through the period, and annual flower watering was also ongoing, and trust me, that was an ongoing job, your worship, because it didn't rain much. And the flower pots that we have this year, the color system outlying, I'm sure, the Canada 150 with the red and white, tremendous job. And those girls out there do a tremendous job, and we thank them for that. River Park campground operations continue steady. Late July and August are typically busy due to hockey schools and other local events. Some mosquito operations, very little mosquitoes this year, your worship, and that's, again, the lack of rainfall, so I guess we can thank goodness for one thing and pray on the other side for something else. We have some cases of Dutch elm disease. They're both on private properties, and both of these trees have been removed. These are the first cases of DED since 2 infected trees were removed in 2013, and the 10th overall instance over the past 25 years. So our track record, your worship, over those years has been very, very good, and our parks crew look after that, and again, we thank them for the job they do. In 2017, the Communities in Bloom judging occurred on July 26th. A full day of tours, information sessions were presented to provincial judges, and I'm sure we'll find out their results in a few weeks to come. The installation of post chain along the 0.75 kilometer portion of East Tatakaview corridor south of 1st Avenue Northeast is currently underway and was scheduled by the end of August. Going back to that, I just want to go over this again, your worship. Dutch elm disease was the northwest part of our city. There was two trees on private property. On contracted work, the 2017 Lines Crosswalk program was completed early in July. It was supposed to come earlier in that season. It didn't come for some reasons. Prior to the oil show, it was supposed to be here, but anyway, things happened, and the job they did is satisfactory. And hopefully we have a fall painting as well, and we'll see what happens there. Carryover local improvement was resurfaced on 5th Street. They did a great job on that. And Source Avenue, the Highway 13 West Bridge deck was done, and another good job. And Phase 2 of the Elks Park Playground, and they have accessible swing there. And again, that is completed and looks very good as well. The installation of a new catch basin, I won't go into that, your worship, it hits the agenda tonight. And the supply and installation of credit card swipe receipt system at the city's potable water standpipe has been awarded to a local contractor. This is a primary portion of several budgeted improvements to the facility, and work is scheduled to begin in early September. A request for quotations on the construction of accessible pedestrian sidewalk, and this is approached in our agenda, I believe, in 7C, and also an RFQ for intersection asphalt on Moore Street. This is, again, is allocated in our 2017 budget. This report, your worship, was given to us by Claude Morin.
Is there any discussion? I have one question. Mr. Hardy, in the reference to the cleanup of the farm, I know that this was an ongoing thing that we had. We finally got at this after many years. They were cleaned out, some of the stuff, but as it said in that report, there's quite a bit more than what they actually thought than for us to clean up. So was there a substantial, do you know, or could you report back to council for us, was there substantial costs, a lot more manpower and time for this? And if so, are we going to bill back this?
Through you, Your Worship, in response, I did go out and, as one of my tours, took a look at the farm, and obviously, for those who have seen it for a period of time, obviously they're going to notice that there's a difference. There was tens of thousands of dollars of staff time and equipment use that's there, and I don't see any reason why we wouldn't try to bill the individual who had access to that property during that time to do the cleanup.
Question? And at this point in time, the city farm is no longer, I guess that'll come in there, but that's good at this point in time. What's going to happen with that city farm? Is there any idea?
Your Worship, a little early for me to be able to tell you, but I can certainly make inquiries from my staff as to what certainly is the future of that property.
Okay, thank you. Consent agenda, cash activity report. Mr. Van Betcher.
Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion that the purchases in the amount of $5,244,973.03 from August 11th to August 24th, 2017 be passed for payment.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
That's the accounts payable. It's supposed to be cash activity.
Were you going to review that at all? We did cash activity?
Okay. Your Worship, I'd like to make the motion that the cash activity report for July 2017 be accepted as presented.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Motions, now accounts payable.
Apologize, Your Worship. That the purchases in the amount of $5,244,973.03 from August 11th to August 24th, 2017 be passed for payment.
I'm going to second that.
Discussion? Why are the $5 million?
That is a GIC.
The GSE? Okay. All in favor? Carried unanimously. External audit services, RFP. If you would, please, Mr. Hardy.
Yes, Your Worship, staff have conducted a review of requests for audit proposals, and the staff have recommended the invitation for external audit services for the 5 years from 2017 to 21 be awarded to MNP, LLP, and the city manager and director of finance be authorized to finalize the details and sign an agreement. Your Worship, any questions can be directed to the director, who is the author of the report.
Any comments on the report?
I did this report up based on a point system, so the max points for 60 points for fees and 40 for credentials, experience, and municipality experience, and previous experience with the city. As you can see, MMP ended up with the most points. Cogent was close behind. They had the lowest fees. But based on staffing and the experience, that's how MMP got a little higher. With the fees, I only based it on the direct audit fees. There is extra fees that MMP will charge, or has charged in the past for financial statement prep and other services, which they included in their proposal. The others did not. So that's something that I did not base any of my decision on, because I suspect that they would have the fees as well. Maybe not as high, but I'd have to find out if that's the avenue you want to go.
Mr. Mickle.
Thank you, Worship. Laura, I'm a little confused, but I know you'll answer my question and help me out here. There's 3 tenders, 3 local tenders, but that's great. We're taking the highest of the tenders, and you explained what you did. The only difference that the one didn't have was a financial audited statement, and you assumed that was going to be significantly higher. Can you maybe explain that significantly higher figure? because we are going with the higher tender here for cost versus a lower one of 35,000 versus 40,500.
Do you mean the non-audit services? Yeah, so that's up to you. I can go back and ask them what they would charge for these non-audit services, because they were not included in their proposal. That's why I didn't include them. Because at the current time, our system doesn't provide us the ability to prepare the financials right out of it, and with the amount of accounts that we have, it's pretty laborious and it's pretty hard to prepare. So MMP has typically done that, and they have it all set up. So that's something you can definitely find out if it's the avenue.
If I can,
Yeah, maybe I could ask Manager Roy if you can maybe give me some little heads up on this.
yeah, I think that in terms of the information provided, when we ask for proposals, I mean, we want to obviously ensure that there's a level playing field when it comes to responding to that information. So if any of the proponents don't provide complete information for us, it basically makes makes any work that others have done negated if you start going into negotiating or having further second or third discussions. And in effect, you're losing the advantage you have, because the issue is they're not all working with the same information, and they may request an information to say, well, that's to be negotiated at a later date. It would be much better if in replying to this response, given their auditors, I would generally suggest that they should have been more specific in, even if they couldn't identify how long that particular activity would take, they would at least identify what the billing rate would be for that particular information. So to provide a response that says to be negotiated, in effect, you're inviting the fact that you're putting a foreign element into the process. And when it comes to audit, I mean, it's all about transparency. The issue is you don't go into a contract and then negotiate afterwards what the terms are. So if we're looking from a staff perspective, our concern is that to have further discussions would defeat the purpose of actually asking for quotations and giving the people the option to provide that information right up front. And one of the firms actually did that, so we were able to quantify that information.
Thank you, Your Worship. One more question. Laura, is it typical we go with the 5-year contract, or is it normally 3 years?
In the past, it was 5 years.
Okay.
Mr. Van Betju?
Yes, I have a question in regards to the additional fees, and I don't know the number exactly, but I think it's fairly high, the additional fees that we had being charged by MNP. And I don't want to ask that amount, just because I'm still wondering whether we can go back to these companies and ask them for that additional information, or if that would be just totally out of line. I see the points here, and I look at MNP at 85 points and Cogen at 83 points, so they're very close, but MNP gets 10 points because of their audit experience with the City of Weyburn. Well, we're back to that old thing, how do you get experience if you don't get a chance? And you take that experience away, and then all of a sudden Cogen's up 8 points ahead of the previous one. So I don't think I'm satisfied with or comfortable with making this decision without those other numbers, especially since we are spending city dollars, and I think there could be savings there going to the other firm. There may not be, but I think it's something that we should probably
Certainly, certainly, Your Worship, this is in response through you to Councillor Van Betju. It's certainly, we identified it as there are options for council. This is a decision by council. We just wanted to make sure that from a staff perspective, we were giving you our best information. And there's not a right or wrong answer in this, but it's just important to make it understood that this can't be an opportunity that you provide to one without providing it to all three in some cases.
Mr. Van
Yeah,
Fletcher?
and that's what I just want to make sure I don't taint the process, or we don't taint the process, for sure. And I leave that up to our administration to figure out.
So with that being, any further discussion? So with that being said, what are your recommendations?
Well, our recommendation basically stands, but I think council needs to make a decision as to whether it wants staff to go back and have they would need to give us direction to, go back and, fill in the blanks with respect to the information that hasn't been provided by any of the firms. And also to have a similar discussion with that one firm that also provided that information up front.
Your Worship, I would like to make a motion that administration does go back to the three companies that bid on to get more detailed information rather than award the bid tonight.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Further discussion? If there's no further discussion, call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Second motion on the agenda, access pedestrian ramps, RFQ. Go ahead.
Your Worship, the report outlines recommendations from the Superintendent of Public Works and Parks, and the recommendation of the three bids that were all received from non-local terms were summarized in the report. Staff are recommending the acceptance of the lowest bid tender.
Is there any questions? Mr. Chelsea?
Your Worship, I'll make a motion that the quote from Husini Concrete and Paving Stone Limited for the supply and installation of access ramps at identified intersections in the City of Weyburn in the amount of $35,828 be accepted.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Any discussion? There was the, now did this fall into the exact amount that the project was going to cost?
Through Your Worship, the budgeted amount was $32,000. Therefore, staff would have to make adjustments within the budgeted amount to identify the amount of work that could be done for that budgeted amount.
So the question is called in, are we going to stay within a budget? And because the amount here is, awarded amount was $35,828, when we have, and the budgeted amount was $32,000?
Yeah, and the two options that were identified in the report is to delete one ramp from the scope to come below the budgeted amount, or approve the work as bid, including this small overage of $4,984.
And is that what the proposal says the motion is?
Yeah.
It is?
Yes, Your Worship.
To complete as in full is the bid. Any further discussion? Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, I'll agree with doing the full scope. It would cost more next year to bring them back to do it, and it's probably going to be more expensive next year. So if we spend an extra $4,000, we probably are going to be saving something in the long term.
No further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Yes, we'll adjust the money. Airport fence installation.
Your Worship, that particular report, which is provided by the assistant engineer, identifies the location and the information contained in the request for quotations. The recommended of staff is that based on the cost and looking at a 72, installing a 72-inch chain link fence with plastic weaves is the appropriate way to go, and it's recommended that Strictly Fences supply and install 690 feet of this commercial chain link fence and plastic weave for a total cost of $18,170 plus applicable taxes, recognizing that we'll get 50% reimbursement from the Ministry of Highways and 25% reimbursement from the adjacent property owner.
Thank you, Roy. I'm pleased to make a motion that Strictly Fences in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan for the supply and installation of fence materials for a 72 inches light commercial chain link fence and 340 feet of light commercial chain link fence with plastic weave inserts at the Weyburn Airport in the amount of $18,170 to be accepted.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion?
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question. The budgeted amount was $15,000. The estimate came in around $18,000. So the 50% reimbursement is 50% of the $18,000 or 50% of the budgeted $15,000?
15% of the $18,000.
Perfect. Thank you.
We're good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chaplain.
So plus another 25%?
Plus the 25% contribution from the adjacent property owner. So we're
then
within our budget.
So then that relieves us with only a quick calculate, about $3,000 or $4,000?
Very minimal cost.
Very minimal cost.
Very good. Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Strategic planning meeting resolution.
Your Worship, there is a, under the Cities Act, basically every council may have meetings for the purpose of long-range or strategic planning without the transaction of actual business during that time. Discussion generally was had in the Administrative Committee, and I believe that council had identified a potential date of September, Sunday, September the 10th for to have that strategic planning meeting, and I would just request that council make a motion and to set that as a meeting date.
Mr. Chessel?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll make a motion that council hold an in-camera strategic planning meeting as per Section 94 of the Cities Act at 8 a.m. at City Hall on Sunday, September 10th, 2017.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion?
I would just like to clarify that 8 a.m. date, or time period. Is that what we had decided? I thought we were at 9, but...
Was it? Okay.
You want
8 to 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, all right.
Would you rather do 9?
No, 7 to 3.
No. 8 to 4? Okay. All in favor? Carried unanimously. And that was section which, 94?
94. 94-4.
There is no introduction of bylaws. Now into old business. There was a notice of motion amending the procedures of the bylaw by Mayor Roy. Bylaw 2013-3291, procedural bylaw amended to provide greater clarity and specifications on procedures regarding in-camera closed meetings. B, add provisions to ensure no resolution are passed within in-camera meetings outside of duly constituted public meeting of council. C, remove administrative committee provisions. D, include public forum at a length of 5 minutes per person to council meeting agenda. And E, having Schedule A of the City of Weyburn bylaw 2013-3291 accurately reflect Part 3 of the Local Authority Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act. Mr. Hardy, you have provided some extra details, starting off with Part 1A.
Yes, Your Worship, the additional information which has been provided to The additional information which is provided to council is included in the package, including some additional information that was provided by yourself. There is a report from staff with respect to some of the aspects of that, and a copy of the procedures bylaw. Your Worship, in terms of process, as a notice of motion, you're obviously moving that. There would need to be a seconder, and when you wish to address the issue, it would be advisable that you give the chair to the deputy during that period of time when you want to make your statements with respect to the motion.
Do you have a seconder for this motion?
Seconder would be for the purposes of having discussion.
I'll second that motion, Your Worship.
Mr. Wheeler? At this point in time, discussion? I'll just, who's my deputy mayor here?
Councillor Richards.
Councillor Richards. Deputy Mayor, I'll pass the gavel to you. I just want to make a note as to why, to bring this up as to why at this point in time. I want to make sure that this administration, we campaigned on this point. I think myself and a lot of the other ones, so a few of the other councillors campaigned on this point of greater clarification and transparency to our citizens. There's also a movement out there, if you can see that provided in the packages that are also, it is additional that I sent out, that out of the 11 cities out of over 6,000, basically that we are one of the few cities that, I think about the one, except for Regina, Saskatoon, have it that they say that there's no decisions being made. The rest say clearly within it that there's no resolutions being made in closed sessions. And it's all a part that at the mayor's meeting, they were talked about a lot of the young junior villages and towns had the same discussion of this and wanted clarification from our Bonnie Chambers from Urban Affairs. I was there talking to them and saying that these resolutions are not to be made in closed council. And that's why I want a clarification. We want to give it so that our city and our citizens know that we as a council are a business city. We're open for opportunity. There's nothing that is going to be held back from them that we're not. And it is simply better transparency for the city. And that's why I ask for these provisions to be made.
Councilor Mickle.
Thank you, Chairman Richards. Your Worship, it has merit, but I'd like to make a couple points. We have a new administration team within just about 2 weeks. In fairness to our new administrator and his team, I think it needs further study by our city manager. It has some valid points. I would like to have this put on the agenda of our strategic plan on September the 10th.
Mr. Hardy?
Your Worship, the points raised by Councillor Mickle, there are some pieces that I think, yeah, you're right, in some ways that the way that council does business is something that I would like to have the opportunity to talk to council about, which would include some of the elements which are in this notice of motion. And while the process is one that, in terms of strategic planning, we want to sort of get a sense, we want to, at a very high level, to know where it is we're heading and how we're going to get there. I think it's important that, you know, some of the elements, the principles that you've talked about are ones that we need to sort of keep in mind and review some of these policies as to how council works and how council does its work. And I would be prepared to assist to assist to having that discussion, and then following it up with any, you know, with any sort of change in procedures that we might need to do in reworking the procedural bylaw to make some changes to basically promote the fact that pretty well all of council's business has to be done in public, and that there are certain circumstances under which you can go in and have discussions and make restricted types of decisions in closed council, but then you have to report those out. So it's kind of a method whereby we can sort of tweak the processes, but at the same time make sure that there's the transparency and the accountability that the public generally wants and that we expect as council and administration.
Councillor Van Betsch.
Thank you, Your Worship, or Chairman. I totally agree that transparency is very important. Part of that process, I think, with transparency is making sure that we communicate decisions that we have made properly to the public. And I think maybe there was more lacking in that, but I do feel it necessary to say that I don't feel the previous councils were doing anything behind closed doors that they shouldn't have been doing or making decisions that were out of line with the Cities Act. There is land, labor, and legal decisions that were certainly made that are to be in camera. But I do feel that some of the representation, or it's been portrayed that there was some wrong things that were done previously by council in camera, and I don't think that is the case. As I say, maybe some things weren't communicated so the public felt properly, but I don't feel that there was anything that was done or hidden purposely or for malice.
The purpose, if I could?
Yeah.
The purpose of bringing forth this is that, again, we're not going backwards, we're looking forwards. We want to make sure that we, as a council here, set the goals towards the future to make sure, and as I go to many of these meetings that I've been attending, the thing has been resounded throughout the province that, and throughout Canada, of transparency, better openness, making the meetings more open, making the meetings more on camera. We've now brought our film into being able to be seen on our website so that more people can be doing this. And when we review the template, as you saw in the information that was provided, the province has even set out a template and set out even in the one part of their template stating that resolutions are not to be made, no resolutions whatsoever to be made in camera or in closed session, and that they have to be, it has to be a greater transparency. Although we may see some of our senior governments may not be quite as transparent as what they, we as the citizens may feel, but we, as a local government, most certainly want to push that we have to be transparent. We're dealing with our taxpayers' money. We have to show how we are handling the taxpayers' money because they are working hard for it, and we have to have this transparency. And that is what people are asking of us, to be able to be open, clear, and transparent. And by doing this, just cleaning up the bylaw as such so that there is no cloudiness, no nothing of our, as we, of all the people that are sitting here, are not going to have any thought of being any, having anything, any wrongdoings. We want to leave that legacy that we were as transparent as we possibly can be.
Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I hope my voice will hang out here for Chairman Richards. Just a comment to Roy. I guess in reading these 15 pages, it went wow, and then you had to refer to other things and everything. Could you give us in that report on September kind of the Reader's Digest version of it, of what we have and what the proposed changes are without having to go into the bylaws every time?
Certainly. Through you, Your Worship, just in terms of looking at it, the basic premise, as I've said, the principle that we're working on is that as much as possible, the transaction of business of a council is done in open session. That there are certain topics under which discussion to protect personal information, negotiations for the purposes of land or for labor relations are such that business can be conducted in closed camera. But the issue is that at the end, there's some type of reporting out that council has discussed the issue related to X. The second thing generally I would say is that the administrative committee, in terms of process, needs to be one that has both open and closed elements. So generally, the practice that we've been sliding into is that everything in the admin meeting is closed, and that is not necessarily the way to do it. So taking a look at how that we might change, we might again tweak it to ensure that we're keeping within guidelines, recognizing that we're basically going to work together on this and move it forward. And there are some elements that I generally want to talk about, given that council had a very brief orientation to what the 4 roles of council are in terms of developing a budget, providing oversight of what staff is doing, primarily through their city manager, to represent the public and its interests, and in terms of developing policies, having that role of creating policies, and the focus being on policies, not necessarily the operations, is giving staff general direction in terms of what needs to be done, and then providing oversight at a higher level than actually providing direction to staff on what they do in their daily business, because that's what you hire staff for at the end of the day. So it's just basically to go look at those to make sure that how we're working as a council and as administration are sticking with those principles.
Thank you. I think what we're doing here to review it is an important part of moving forward, like you say, Your Worship. But we just have to be very careful if we're going to change things, that we're changing them for the right ideas and the right projections of what we want to accomplish. Thank you.
Not knowing my role very well here, I'll ask the city clerk if am I allowed to make a comment as well as? Okay. First, I would like to commend Mayor Roy on the work you've done here. This is a tremendous amount of research and effort you've put in, and I think this is just absolutely great. And this is what I do believe we were all elected to do, is provide a very clear path for the city of Weyburn. So I thank you for that. And although I don't believe anything nefarious, that I agree with Councillor Van Betju, I don't think anything nefarious has happened in the past. I think we could do a better job. I absolutely think that we could do a better job. I know that a lot of us have struggled with the admin committee structure that's in place, again, just because we're new and we're not familiar with it. So I also would support Councillor Mickel's recommendation for this to go to our strategic planning session and have our new city manager sort of show us, what this might look like and what these changes might be when they're put in place. So if there's no further discussion,
You need to formally put them.
Right. So there is a motion on the floor by Mayor Roy to amend bylaw 2013-3291, seconded by Councillor Wheeler. So if there's no further questions, yeah, it's clear I don't know what I'm doing, so jump right in.
If you wish to refer it to another meeting, you could move at this time to postpone this motion until after your strat planning meeting on September 10th. If you choose to do it.
There's already a motion on the floor. We don't need to deal with it.
No, if you postpone this motion until after September 10th, you can postpone this motion on the floor by making another motion.
Did you want to make that motion?
No, well, let's postpone the motion.
Oh, that's what I meant.
I'll make the motion to postpone the motion.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I will second that, Your Worship. Mr. Jeff.
Councillor Chessel? Any further discussion on the motion to postpone the motion? Then we'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
You did great.
Don't ever do that.
Yes, you did great. Very good. You did very good. Thank you. And we look forward to revisiting this motion. Yeah. We now bring up the Queen Street rail crossing update. If we would, please, Mr. Hardy?
Your Worship, this is just an update in terms of being able to relay to council and from discussions, the discussions that have occurred from the council in the past, that I've been working with the acting city engineer to move this project forward. And I obviously feel that there are some options that need to be put forward, and those relate to basically the issue of safety. And the issues of safety have been raised both at the Queen Street crossing, but also just to the north of it at the intersection of 13 and 39. And I think just generally what I would say is I'm working to get something back to council as quickly as possible from the engineer so that we can basically lay out 2 or 3 options for council to consider that address maybe both of those issues, but it's certainly going to be up to council in terms of what the resolution is. There are some potential short-term things that could be done. Obviously, the recommendation or the information that I have, I would suggest to council is I agree with you wholeheartedly that the time frame, it's not good to wait until that deadline, which is imposed by the federal government, because the longer you take that, the less money there's going to be able to address that either within the city or from senior levels of government or in partnership with CP. So it's going to be important that we get onto this really quick, define our options, and then meet with some of those potential partners to see if we can address this issue effectively for the sake of for safety, both in terms of rail and commuter traffic.
Mr. Hardy?
Council, have any questions or comments? I'm open to that.
Yeah, just a commentary, Roy, that I don't want us to suffer from paralysis by analysis on this issue. Councillor Mickles talked about it lots, that this has been beaten around the council chambers for a lot of years, and there are steps we can take to start to try to improve that intersection. It doesn't have to be I believe in my soul, we don't have to commit today to keeping it open or keeping it closed. I think we can have a couple of channels operating simultaneously. We can try to improve what we have today while still looking at the next 25 years. So I just want to impress upon an entire administrative team that let's not be having this conversation at Christmas time. Thank you, Bishop.
Mr. Hardy, is there any ideas on continuing on with what Mr. Richards said, any ideas as to what some of the things that could possibly be done in the interim? Certainly from my perspective and from the engineer's perspective, there are a couple of issues related to sight lines, not only at Queen Street, but also obviously it was raised in the earlier discussions with CP and with highways with respect to the 13 and 39 intersection. I think those are 2 of the elements that have got to be part of the long-term solution in terms of that. I know that at this point in my history elsewhere in the province, that there is some federal funding available in terms of supporting these things, and certainly the apparent severity of where this crossing or where Weyburn sits in terms of its safety assessment or risk assessment there is that it would tend to be able to get federal funding much higher, because of obviously it's been identified as as something that needs to be happen more quicker than not. So there's also a couple of other channels that I'm going to be looking into in talking with
Transport Canada in terms of what, where that stands and what types of solutions they might be, the federal government might be able to support. But I understand certainly that there are some more immediate things that can be done with sightlines around Queen Street in having discussions with the property owners along there to see if we can clean up some sightlines. I gather there's some vegetation that's along there, and if we can at least clean that up, it at least reduces, it increases the margin of time that an individual has to react to train traffic along that stretch.
Thank you. Further discussion? If not, we'll move forward to new business. We have the Weyburn Utility Rural Water Connection is on. If we could, Mr. Hardy.
Yes, Your Worship. There is a request for rural water hookup from Doyle and Valerie Thomas, and basically that this information has been provided, and I gather that what we need to do is to approve that rural water application so that they can be connected.
Your Worship, I'd like to make the motion that the application for access to rural pipeline for the following rural applicant be approved, subject to fulfilling the Weyburn Utility Board city residential water hookup requirements. Doyle and Valerie Thomas at southeast at 20, 9 of 15 west of the 2nd.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call discussion. Call the question. All in favor? Carried. The development permit of SaskTel Tower, 1711 East Avenue.
Yes, Your Worship. The staff are recommending approval with conditions that council approve the cellular self-support tower at that location, subject to the conditions that the developer is responsible for ensuring that the structure is properly secured by guy wire anchors capable of withstanding wind loads, and must erect a fence of 2.44 meters in height around the cellular tower with access provided through a locked gate to prevent any trespassers from accessing the site or structure. Staff are generally indicated that they are prepared to recommend this approval with those conditions.
Thank you, Manager Hardy. Prepared to make a motion that the development permit of SaskTel for the placement of a 45-meter self-supporting tower at 1711 East Avenue, parcel 12, plan 74R, 32546/101388944, extension 3, subject to the following conditions. The developer is responsible for ensuring the cell tower structure is properly secured by guy wires, anchors capable of withstanding wind loads, and the developer must erect a fence of 2.44 meters in height around the cellular tower structure with all accessible access provided to a locked gate, and shall take precautions to prevent any trespassers from accessing the site or structure.
Do you have a seconder?
I'll second it, Your Worship.
Discussion? Mr. Richards?
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you very much. Just to be clear, so even, anytime we do a development permit, we always reach out to the neighbors in the surrounding area. I assume we've done that again with these cellular towers, that the neighbors in and around have been contacted to ensure that they don't have any conflicts or any concerns with the towers or anything like that?
That's correct. As part of the, Your Worship, as part of the, through Your Worship, as part of the process, public notification is given and submitted to everybody within 75 meters of the subject lands, and we had not received any responses with respect to this tower.
Thank you. One more question.
Yes,
one more question, if I would. Thank you. Also, the purpose of these towers, just to be clear, is to improve cellular service throughout the city, the 4G and the LTE service on these towers to improve, so we can all get on Twitter a little quicker.
That's correct.
Perfect.
Just a comment, I believe it's on their property also that they're putting
Yes.
this.
Yes, it is.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Development permit, SAS Tower, 16th Street and 5th Avenue.
Your worship, what applies to the previous application also applies to this application. What is being recommended by staff is that the proposed location along the buffer at the corner of 16th Street and 5th Avenue be subject to the conditions of before with respect to guy wire anchors and the locked gate and fencing. Again, it's the same story, it's just at a different location.
Mr. Richard?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make a motion that the development permit of SaskTel for the placement of a 35-meter man-pole structure on the municipal buffer located at the corner of 16th Street and 5th Avenue be approved, subject to the following conditions. Number one, that the developer is responsible for ensuring the cellular tower structure is properly secured by wire anchors capable of withstanding wind loads, and that the developer must erect a fence of 2.44 meters in height around the cellular tower structure with all access provided through a lock gate, and shall take precautions to prevent any trespassers from accessing the site or the structure.
Seconder?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? Question is this on SaskTel's property again? No. No?
No, this is on the buffer.
It's where the existing one is?
Yes.
So, and just a comment, as we are growing in a city and we're going to be this bigger city and growing to and getting set to grow, we need these type of towers. We need this matter. We're advancing, and this is all part about sustainability and better facilities and infrastructure to our citizens here. Any other discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. The additional item on new business, item D, report to council out of closed council.
Out of the admin committee meeting, Your Worship, I have two recommendations that need to go to council. The first is that with respect to the Primrose Holdings land sale request, that the city approve the request to sell with the conditions as follows. The any improvements are completed within 9 months' time. The city be provided with an affidavit stating actual amount of sale. All outdated permits required must be submitted, and the purchaser being required to pay the quit claim fee for the default in the agreement. This is with respect to the resale of a former city property held currently by Primrose Holdings.
Call for Mr. Van Betschuk. Make the resolution.
Yes, I will make a motion that we approve the sale of that property.
Okay.
Mr. Chessel.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? These are again as one of the few properties that was during the boom times that simply got caught in through this whole downturn, and it's good to see that there are others that are picking this up and being able to continue on. And we, as a council, I speak for myself as mayor, that I would not like to see any blocks. I'm sure the council seems to be of the same thing, that we want to make sure that business is moving forward, and we are allowing business to move forward. Call the question. All in favor? Carried.
Your Worship, the second motion is with respect to the Douglas Heights Subdivision Servicing Agreement, and the motion reads as follows, that the City of Weyburn grant the extension of the existing servicing agreement along with the three-phase approach to allow the developer time to assure quality work completed with the following conditions. The developer and his consultant report on the progress monthly to the City of Weyburn, that no securities will be released or reduced until the full completion of all three phases has occurred and been approved. And third, that no work shall proceed until an updated letter of credit shall be submitted to the City of Weyburn.
Your Worship, I'd like to excuse myself for that motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr.
Your
Mickle?
Worship, can I make that statement into a motion?
You can
Yes.
recommend, you can do the staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation.
Mr. Wheeler?
I'd like to second that motion, please.
Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried.
Again, Your Worship, this is a continuation of an existing project to see it through to fulfillment.
Queries and announcements. We'll just, here's the next one.
Did you ask for it?
Yes, queries and announcements. Starting off.
I have one, Your Worship. I do this every year. This is the start of school coming up very shortly, and I just want to draw the attention to our motorists to have an extra eye out for those little ones hustling off to school with their bikes or on the bus or whatever. We can't be too safe. And so just a little heads up before we head back to school, and look out for our children.
Mr. Richards?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to, as excited as we are to have Mr. Hardy here, and we certainly are, I'd also just like to quickly send a thanks out to Jolene Tutcher, who served us amicably as our interim city manager, and I know that she didn't lose any sleep, but she sure threatened to a couple of times, I think, so I'd like to just thank her.
Mr. Van Betcher?
Yes, just to add on to what Councillor Richard says, and to our city clerk and our department heads and all the city staff, who I think all took on a lot more responsibilities as well in the absence of a city manager. I would like to thank all of them also.
As we query, there's a couple queries that I would like to query our new manager, our city manager, Mr. Hardy. I thank him for, again, welcome him here with all his knowledge. And there are a couple of queries that were put to me through the day. One was that the flushing in lines, and we noticed we talked about flushing in the lines. One citizen asked, and you can get back to me on the next meeting, they wondered, with this dryness that we have, when we flush the lines, is there any reason or is there any way possible that the water, instead of it being, as the hydrants are being flushed, that they can't flush it out onto some of the lawns of where the areas are being, so, and that was the question that they had there, to be able to capture, and then the people within the surrounding areas could put it onto lawns and put it onto their trees that are in the area, as opposed to just flushing it down.
As to putting it into the street system quickly, seeing if we can. I'll look into that definitely, Your Worship.
And the second thing is that there's always been street lights. There's been one person that talked to me about how even going from, I believe, Cotto all the way up to, from Souris all the way up, that there's almost like 22 street lights out all along the way. And there's always been issues along the city, and since we've taken over as administration, and we've heard that there's so many street lights, and if you have any knowledge of this.
Your Worship, I do have a general knowledge that this has been an ongoing problem. I also understand that this has been something that we're going to need to work with Sask Power on, and I believe what it has to do is that the underground connections are just not working, and any above ground connections, the temporary connections that they put in place, they're feeling they're coming to the limits of what they're able to do. So staff will be meeting with Sask Power to have some inquiries with respect to, how we can facilitate this renewal of this infrastructure. And at the same time, I think it's an opportunity for us to take a look at things like seeing as the city's responsible for the purchase or the capital purchase of the fixtures, that we put in the most energy efficient fixtures that we can, which would basically include putting in LED lighting in both the overhead street lights as well as the pedestrian lights that may be in that area. So we'll be reviewing that, having that discussion with Sask Power. They generally have a list of the types of lighting fixtures that they want, but I think it's time that we ask them to, if they want us to look at infrastructure renewal, that they need to provide us with the greatest opportunity to save money over the longer term. And so and I'll report back to council once we've had those meetings.
Thank you, appreciate that. Any further questions and queries? With that, there's no, any notice of motions that any of you wish to bring forward? None at this point in time. Then I thank you all for your participation. I thank you for your viewing at home, and I call this meeting adjourned.